Hello, I'm Jennifer Lee, Senior Admin Evangelist at Salesforce, and welcome to our April Automate This. I come to you live every month and come back here on the same page to watch the video again on Video on Demand. The quick video that you just saw was Einstein GPT for Flow, and it was announced at the recent DC World Tour. Pretty exciting. The best way to be notified when we live stream is to set the reminder on your live stream episode page, so you get an email reminder the day of the event. Now, to interact with the audience, post your comments in the chat. To interact with me and my guest presenters, start your question with a Q colon so I can quickly scan through and identify your questions for the Q&A. Now, here's what you're going to learn in today's episode from our two guest presenters. You're going to learn about actions and what actions to take before you build your automation, making sure the underlying business process is optimized, that you prioritize your work correctly, and that you've identified KPIs that you can use to measure its effectiveness. Then understand the use cases for synchronous versus asynchronous automations and know which pattern to use in which scenario. And lastly, learn about tools to handle multiple automations per object, like when to use flow orchestration, setting priorities on your record-triggered automations, and more. And, oh, we lost Tom. So hopefully we will get Tom back. So today I'm excited to join forces with the architect relations team and bring their well-architected series to automate this. And when Tom joins us back, and specifically, we're going to talk about, you guessed it, automation. So let me introduce our two guest presenters today. Tom, who will eventually show up in box number 2. He is the Principal Architect Evangelist at Salesforce and our first CTA on Automate This, and a fellow Bostonian, Melissa Shepard. Welcome both. So I'm an admin, not an architect. Melissa, how would you say these roles are similar?
So what I would say is admins are always trying to come up with good solutions for their users. So that's also something an architect really has to keep in mind is how can I solve this problem for the users? What's going to be the best user experience? And then bring the technology in behind that to then make everything work, right? So that's the smaller part of it. So architects are focused on a bigger picture, but it involves what an admin does. So I had to really learn a lot of admin skills on my journey to CTA and just really understand how the platform is used by users. What are the out of the box tools that can be used to easily solve problems, things like that.
Great. So we'll loop back to Tom when he joins, but Melissa, so you're a certified technical architect, and what an achievement that is. How
Thank you.
long did it take you to become certified? I know that that's not an easy journey to take.
It's not. So I kind of started dabbling in it in 2019 and then walked away for over a year. Went back to it in around August or September 2020. I did a first review board attempt in November 2020, and I didn't pass. I just didn't really have enough time to prepare. I just kind of took a chance, and I ended up starting a study group, and that's the Architect Ohana Slack. So that grew out of a study group that I put together so I could pass the board. So I went back and I spent another 9 months just working with the study group and having calls and doing mocks, and went back in October 2021 and ended up passing. So a little over a year, fully, really committed to it.
Wow. Again, such a big achievement. So how did you celebrate that?
I celebrated by going on world tour. I just started speaking everywhere. I was like, might as well just go share my knowledge now that I'm not studying. And I just was really blowing off a lot of steam from being stuck indoors during the pandemic and then being stuck in my house having to study and do mocks, because when you do mocks you've got to prepare for hours and then you've got to present and you've got to have a certain setup with your computer when you're doing it virtually, so you really can't do that in a mobile way, so I was stuck at home.
Wow. All right, so Tom must still be having technical issues here getting back on board. So can you just give us a quick overview of what well-architected automation is and why it's important for admins?
Sure. So the well-architected automation is different ways that you can build automation, the different tools that you can use, and the different use cases of when you might want to apply them. So there's times when you want to use one versus the other because there's more benefits to that tool, like using Flow or Apex or whatever you're doing. There's just considerations you need to take. So the framework is helping to guide you to make those decisions. So a lot of being an architect, and this is where admins can really start to step into their architect role, is building the mindset. And that's the decision making. So that's being able to take a bunch of inputs and basically run them through decision trees in your head and then say, this is going to be the way I'm going to do this based on the information I've been given, because I've gone through this decision tree and I know the different choices and I know one is better than the other because of XYZ based on the information I've been given. So that's something I like to explain is the architect mindset is based on that kind of decision making. And that's what's so great about the well-architected framework is it outlines that for you. So you can really start learning to build that mindset.
Mm-hmm. And can you just briefly describe, I know that you're going to show us in the demo, but can you briefly describe what asynchronous and synchronous automation is for our admins?
Sure. So synchronous automation is going to be anything you want to do real time. So it's something where you might need an immediate response. Usually it's a scenario where you have a user that does something and they need to have the response back immediately. So they have to sit there and wait. That's synchronous, real time. We call that pattern, and this is the other thing you'll find in well architected is the names of the patterns. We call that a request and reply integration pattern. Asynchronous is going to be where the user is doing something and then some process goes off to do something else and the user does not have to wait for it. They don't have to wait for it to finish. They don't have to wait for a response to come back. And that's going to be a fire and forget pattern. So that allows the user to go on and keep doing whatever they were doing, like do other work, go on to other screens. And then maybe a response comes back to the system at a later time and then they can go check on the results. So they're not sitting there blocked by some system process happening behind the scenes.
Great. Thanks for that explanation. So why don't we have you go ahead and do your demonstration of async versus synchronous automation?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. All right. So I'm going to show you a process of a user creating an order. And then this order is going to be integrated with an ERP system. So there's a few steps to that integration. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new order. I'm just going to use one of my lovely accounts that's in my playground. And I'm going to save it. So then the next step is the user is going to add some products and then enter some quantities. And then they'll save those. So this is an important thing where Salesforce is maybe working with another system for inventory. So usually Salesforce isn't the system that keeps track of all your inventory. Something like an ERP system would do that. And that's something that as an admin, you might have to deal with when working in a bigger company that has other systems besides Salesforce. So here, the user would probably want to check to see what that inventory is in the ERP system. So this is an example of a synchronous integration. So the user is going to click the check ERP inventory button and it brings up a flow. So this flow actually makes a call out to this ERP system, checks the inventory for those specific products, brings that back and shows it to the user. So that's an example of Salesforce calling out to a different system, getting some information and then bringing it back for the user because the user needs to see this before they can move along in their process. So the user sees, okay, we have plenty of inventory. I'm going to confirm it, click the button. Great. So now the order is moved into the inventory verified status, and that is done by the flow. And that was a screen flow. And we'll get into the behind the scenes of how that works and how I built that after. So then the user would probably want to confirm the order once they verify the inventory. So they'll change the status to confirmed. And behind the scenes, there's some asynchronous processing happening. So you should see something. Oh, all right. So if you noticed, there was a notification that just popped up over here in the corner. That notification is telling me that the ERP invoice is being created. So when they confirm the order, On the back end, Salesforce is saying, okay, this order is ready to be confirmed. Let's go out to the ERP system and now actually pull those items out of inventory so that they do not get sold to anybody else. So once the ERP is done doing that, a notification comes back, and this is done by a platform event, and it tells me that the ERP invoice is being created. So I'm like, great, go off and do some other work. And then the next step is, and this is
Hello.
where oh, you're back.
Not sure what was up with the technical issues, but yes, and looking forward to seeing the rest of the demo.
Right. So now we're just going to wait for the ERP system to come back and tell us that the invoice has successfully been created. So we know that it's creating it, and now we're waiting for it to actually be created, because once it's created, then we're ready to take payment for this order. Because a lot of times your billing and your accounting and stuff like that is also handled by an ERP system. So something like inventory, also billing, accounting. So there's a lot of communication going back and forth between Salesforce and this ERP system.
Yeah, and the other thing about that is it's about kind of the user journey too when you think about it, right? Because while the ERP system is doing all of those things, you don't want someone sitting in front of a screen just waiting for a reply, right?
Exactly. And because they could be doing other things, they could be working on some other orders, or maybe they have some opportunity work they need to work on. And see, now we have another notification up here, and it's telling me that the ERP invoice has been generated. So that is the ERP coming back to say, this invoice has now been generated. So then the user knows, okay, this order can be ready for payment. So they can come back once they see that notification and then change the status to ready for payment. And then from here, maybe the user is then notified that they have a bill that can be paid in an experience site. So they would log in and then make their payment, and then the order would be completed once the payment's received. And so that would update the order status.
Awesome. So, and then, yeah, and then in the meantime, the user could be going off and doing something else, so they're not necessarily sitting there. And this is a good use case, I think, for something async for sure, especially when you're doing that kind of external call out. And I think you already went through the synchronous use case in the earlier on, right?
I did. Yep. Yep. I walked through all that.
Yeah, and obviously that's good because you've got somebody that's kind of sitting there. Like in that particular case, you do actually need the user to wait for a response to come back. So that looks pretty well architected to me.
Well, thank you. And I did go over what well architected automation is at a high level. So I don't know if you want to jump into that a little bit more and give a little bit more detail.
Yeah, so well architected is our framework for architects, but it's honestly it can be anybody can use it, and it's available on architect.salesforce.com, and we cover really what health looks like for what healthy architecture looks like, and where to focus your time too. So we talk about healthy automations. They're automated as an entire chapter within the well architected framework, and we talk about things. This whole idea of using synchronous versus asynchronous patterns is one of the topics that we cover. And there are a bunch of other ones, like making sure that you actually have an optimized business process before you build an automation, which is one thing that I know Melissa and I, when we were going through the demo and we were kind of talking through like, what does this business process need to look like? That's actually what we were doing, even if we didn't specifically call it out, but we were thinking about, what would a real world scenario look like? Where would somebody need to use synchronous versus asynchronous? And how would we, make sure that the steps actually make sense as far as what somebody would do? So that's another one, an example of something that we cover in well architected.
Yeah, and that's the user experience I was talking about at the beginning. It's so important for admins and also architects. That's where those two roles really overlap, is really having to understand how the user is going to use the system. How is the solution going to support their job and just support them overall?
Right, exactly. So you've got all the list of flows here.
Yep. So I mentioned that we could dive in and look at the details of some of these flows that are behind the scenes doing the work for both the synchronous and asynchronous.
Yeah, that'll be great.
All right. So the first one is the flow that's called by the lightning quick action, the screen flow, when the user checks the inventory in the ERP system synchronously. So can you see it okay now? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So as you can see, it's a screen flow. It goes and it gets the line items for the order and then goes through each line item. And then here, I actually use the new HTTP callout action, which is in beta, which is pretty cool to play around with. And that's a way that you can make a synchronous callout to an external system. And behind the scenes, it creates an external service. So I use that to make my callout to my external system. The information comes back, and I actually update a field on the order object called ERP inventory. So I don't just get the data back to show the user, I actually do save it on the line item on the order as well. And then once that's all done, then the product inventory is shown, and then the orders, once the user clicks confirm inventory, the status is updated, and then a platform event is created. And that is an example of an asynchronous automation where an external system can subscribe to that platform event, and this doesn't block the user. So it happens behind the scenes. User can move on once they've confirmed the inventory, that platform event fires, and then the ERP does the processing.
Nice. Yeah, that's makes a lot of sense. And yeah, and I mean it looks nice and streamlined as well. So this is awesome.
So I will move on to the next one,
Yeah.
which is the flow that creates the platform event to tell the ERP system to create the invoice.
Yeah. Now this is the one we do like towards the end, right?
Second to last, yeah. So
Yeah.
here, this fires once the user moves that order status into confirmed. So the first flow is the screen flow where they confirm the inventory. That's when the status gets put into inventory confirmed. And then they might need to do some other things and then say, okay, I can confirm this order now. They move the status into confirmed. And then this is a record triggered flow that fires off of that order status change. So you can see record is updated and it's checking for the status equals confirmed.
Cool.
So here's another example of how you can build asynchronous automation in your flow. We have versus synchronous. We have a path that runs immediately. That's going to be your synchronous processing. We also have an asynchronous path.
And I think the thing that's worth pointing out here too is that the asynchronous steps run after the synchronous steps are complete, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And they can run
there's a little.
Yeah.
Yep. And there's a little checkbox. I don't know if everyone's familiar with this, but it says include a run asynchronously path to access an external system after the original transaction for the triggering record is successfully committed. Now, I think that wording's a little misleading because it's not just to access an external system, but yes, if you are going to access an external system after your original processing is done, asynchronously, you want to put it on the path. But as you can see here, I just create a platform event on this asynchronous path. So I just do my synchronous processing here. I get a custom notification record ID so I can create the notification. And then once the notification is created, then a platform event is created that tells the ERP system, okay, generate this invoice.
I think the other benefit of creating a platform event like that is that the platform event, it's not just making a call out to one system, it's publishing that event, and then you could have any number of subscribers listening to it. So if you need to send that same information to more than one system, you can, using the way that you set things up here.
Exactly. So maybe there's another system that cares about the fact that an invoice is being generated in the ERP. So a nice way to do this is to have something like MuleSoft, which is a middleware product, subscribe to the platform event, and then it can then notify all the other systems that care about that to do whatever they need to do, whatever processing they need to do.
Right. And one of the other things that it's probably worth pointing out too is when you were showing that checkbox earlier that you see when you're creating the flow, you have to remember to check that at the beginning. Otherwise, you can't go back and adjust it afterwards, can you?
That was we were looking at a different flow where that wasn't there. So no, you can go back and check it.
All right, then that's good. But it also it has to be a record triggered flow, right?
Yes,
Yeah,
that's a good point. Yep.
yeah. So no screen flows or no async pass in a screen flow.
Great.
Yeah. Awesome. And then what was the third one? Was that was sending the or processing the data back when you did get the return notification from the ERP system, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So here you can see that this is a platform event triggered flow.
Yep.
And it fires when the ERP system comes back to create a platform event notification. So it subscribes and it says, okay, the ERP system has come back and told us that it's done doing what it's doing. It gets the order record, updates the order status, and then that's where it puts the status into, I think it was ready for payment. And then we can look here.
Yeah.
Yes, puts it into ready for payment. Creates another custom notification to say the ERP invoice is generated. And that was that second notification that you saw pop up through
Right.
this whole process. And this is another example of asynchronous automation. So when you have a platform event triggered flow, a platform event is considered a way to automate asynchronously within the Salesforce platform. And these events can be created by Salesforce or be created by external systems such as MuleSoft or any other system that's able to write data to that platform event through the API.
Yeah. And the thing I really like about those two is they is platform events and asynchronous patterns in general is they really help your architecture scale. So you can like we said, if you're sending that it's being consumed by MuleSoft and then there are, maybe there's 3 systems listening on the other end, maybe there's 20, but they're all gonna receive that same information, and they're all gonna go and do whatever they need to do with it once they do receive it. Uh, and so it's not going to affect the performance of your Salesforce org because you've already sent that message off, published the event, and it's good to go.
Yeah, and something you're touching on there is the event-driven architecture as well, and that's also in Well Architected because I'm going to be presenting at New York World Tour.
That is awesome. Yeah, we've actually got a couple decision guides on the Architect website that are definitely worth checking out. So one is the event-driven Architect's Guide to Event-Driven Automations, where we talk about all of these different like asynchronous type patterns that you can use to do call outs to other systems, or sometimes even within Salesforce, you would have a use case for doing something like that. And then there's also the Architect's Guide to Record Triggered Automations, which is where we talk about flow and then a bunch of other automation tools. So like the different types of Apex triggers you can write and where you would use one versus another and where flow is a better fit versus where Apex is a better fit. So those are definitely worth checking out. And then from there, yeah, there's well architected automated, and there's a really the entire well architected platform. So in or framework rather. So within automated, we go into specifics about how to choose how to use these patterns within a flow. But there's also within well architected reliable, we talk about performance and scalability in general, and how you should really use asynchronous patterns whenever possible, and reserve the synchronous patterns for times when you really do need that user interaction, or you really do have a user that's kind of waiting for a response for a specific reason.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so the synchronous is, you really only want to use it when you absolutely need to, just because it is a blocking operation. And also with asynchronous, you get higher governor limits on the platform. Like with asynchronous Apex, it's another presentation I do is all on asynchronous automation. You get a lot higher governor limits, so you processing power is a lot higher, and you're going to have more performance and scalability there as well.
Yeah, that's good to know too. And although I mean, you can still exceed those limits, but they're a lot higher, and it's just a preferred pattern in general, is in terms of like user experience
Yeah.
and scalability. So yeah. And and I mean, I like this use case too, because it's a fairly common occurrence where you're going to have somebody entering an order and updating an order in a CRM system, and then you've got an ERP system on the other side that is going to do processing. And I think, like you were saying, kind of when I joined, it could be generating an invoice, but there's a whole bunch of other distribution related processes and things that ERP systems do that some of them could take quite a while before that notification actually gets delivered back to your CRM system too.
Yeah, absolutely. There might need to be integrations with other warehouses, things like that. Yep. So, um, absolutely, that's another reason why you wouldn't want to go with a synchronous integration, because that system could take a long time to respond back to Salesforce, and you really wouldn't want a user there having that experience of waiting and waiting, waiting, and then it times out and gives an error. So also errors and timeouts are another reason why you might want to push something to asynchronous. So user
Yeah,
does some work, it gets pushed asynchronously, then they can come back and check on it later.
yeah, completely agree. Um, and um, what do you think about the idea of using like invocable Apex within so like if you are building an automation and um, you want to execute something asynchronously, but it's going to require some additional work that would be just better to build outside of a flow.
Yep, that asynchronous Apex, invocable Apex is asynchronous, and that is a great way to do some more complex processing and do some work that you might not want to tie up the user within the flow. So that is another great tool to use.
Yeah,
Another thing I've been able to play around with a bit is Salesforce Functions. So that actually goes off and sends work off platform, and then responses can come back.
that's that's pretty cool, and it's designed specifically for that, because I know you can. I've gotten the question sometimes of, well, can't we just build this in using AWS Lambda or something? And it's, yeah, you can, but I think the nice thing with functions is that there's a lot of the work that's done for you, so you're not building things from scratch.
Yeah, absolutely. Did you want me to bring up the well architected page for automated so you could go
Yeah,
through anything?
yeah. Let's take a look.
All right, dive in a little bit. So as you can see, this is architect.salesforce.com, and this is the automated section.
And the way, this is actually a good thing to bring up for anyone who hasn't seen this before too. So this is broken down into a few sections. So if you notice, we've got at the beginning, we've got our introduction, which talks about, what is this topic really and why should I care about it? And then we've got our subtopics that so we've got clear logic, we've got data integrity, and then you can see all that. And then underneath those, we've got things like business process optimization. And this is where we give our prescriptive guidance and recommendations for, as an architect, what should you be thinking about, or honestly as an admin too, because admins more and more, especially as we're adding more functionality into flow, uh, everybody needs to be thinking through this type of advice. And then as you get down a little bit further, or you can probably even click it on the menu on the right hand side, there's a patterns and anti-patterns table,
Yeah,
and that will actually show
this one
things. Yep,
or
that one works. Either one, yeah. And what this will show is things that you should physically be looking for within an org. So if you see things in the patterns column, it's a sign that you're doing something good and you should keep going. If you see something in the anti-patterns column, and you can see, there's one that says Apex, another one that specifically says Flow. If you see anything in the anti-patterns column, it means you might need to think about maybe refactoring something, or maybe even having a tough conversation with a stakeholder about maybe you need to delay a go live because you're going to need to fix something before you keep building on top of some technical debt. But these are things that you can look for. And then all the way down at the bottom, there's a set of tools, a table that has some tools that are relevant to this. So you can see we've got our clear logic, data integrity, and business value across the top, and we've got X's that identify which item is applicable to which. And these are all tools that you can configure within an org to help with those specific topics. So, and the links point out to the actual documentation. And then right below that, there is a resources table that similar format, and that one actually has, instead of being tools being something that you can physically use in an org, these are things that maybe link out to some additional information, or you can read as help docs, and things that you can do a little bit of a deeper dive into than the maybe what's even in the platform, or what's in the framework rather, so you can do some additional reading if you want to. And
Awesome. Well, thanks for that awesome demo of asynchronous and synchronous use cases with Flow, and for explaining well-architected automation to our admins. All right, so we are having technical issues, so we will skip the Q&A. I think what we probably want to do later on is have like a separate session for any questions, maybe like after folks watch the video, then we can maybe do like a half-hour AMA based on any questions, because I'm sure admins are full of questions after watching the session today. So let's recap what we learned in today's episode. So we talked about actions to take before you build your automation. Talked the difference about what a synchronous versus asynchronous automation is, and the different types of use cases, and when to use which type of automation. And then lastly, tools to handle multiple automations per object. Oops.
awesome.
Not this one, but the scene. All right. So in May, I'm going to bring two Flownatics, Gaurav Seth and Eric Smith, who will show their cool flow solutions to increase user efficiency, along with Adam White, Automation PM, who will share recent enhancements to screen flows and his roadmap. So set the reminder on the live stream page and be reminded of it later. All right, and now it's your turn. Review your organization's existing and planned automations to make sure that you're using the right mix of synchronous and asynchronous patterns. Also, check out the event-driven architecture and record-triggered automations decision guides on architect.salesforce.com for more information about synchronous patterns. And lastly, check out the automated chapter of Salesforce Well Architected that Melissa showed with Tom for more information about building good automations. All right, awesome. And with that, thank you, Tom and Melissa, for hanging in there for these technical issues. I apologize.
No worries. Thank you. And I'm happy to do Ask Me Anything in the future too. So.
Yeah, we'll get that figured out and get that scheduled and out there.
Sounds
all
great.
Right. Okay, and again, apologies for the technical issues. Thanks for joining us for an Automate This episode, and I look forward to seeing you at future episodes. And a reminder to the best way to be notified when we live stream is to set the reminder on the live stream episode page, and then you'll get an email reminder the day of the event. We'll also post upcoming sessions on all of our various social channels, so follow us on Twitter at Salesforce Admins, no I, LinkedIn, and the Trailblazer community. And let's continue the learning. So access great content produced for you admins. Visit our website, admin.salesforce.com, to find the latest blogs, podcasts, and videos. Listen to the Salesforce Admins podcast hosted by Mike Gerhold and Jillian Bruce via Apple, Google, and Spotify. Both Tom and Melissa were recently on separately on the Admins podcast with Mike Gerhold. So check that out. And of course, watch our past episodes of Automate This via our playlist on the Salesforce Admins YouTube channel. And then we'll see you next month.